Hello, St. Thomas More. I'm Father R.J. Fichtinger, and my homily for the weekend celebrating the feast of the baptism of our Lord did not record properly, and so this is an attempt to share that homily with you. In February of 1960, 4 black students from the North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University began a series of sit-ins at the F.W. Woolworth Company's 5 and Dime store in Greensboro, North Carolina. While not the first sit-in of the civil rights movement, it would serve as a turning point in the work to desegregate places in the South. This sit-in movement began from February until July, when Woolworths finally relented and changed their policies of segregation and colored or whites-only spaces within their restaurants. This moment, I believe, encapsulates what it means for us to live out our baptismal dignity of priest, prophet, and king. And dare I say, these sit-ins were the exemplar of what it means to love our neighbor in difficult times. So let me break open those 3 different parts of what it means to be called priest, prophet, and king. Today in our gospel, we hear when John the Baptist and Jesus are discussing his very own baptism. And Jesus uses the words righteousness, this idea that he and John will be righteous before the Lord. Now, this is a hard translation in English. Sometimes that word gets translated right-wise or right relationship. The reality is Jesus is calling us to be in right relationship with a God, and perhaps the most profound and extreme thing that Jesus says in all of his ministry is that God is a God of love. Our faith invites us to recognize that ideal of love and that the source of love is God in God's very self. You know, we've all had those moments in which loving someone is not simply saying yes. In fact, love is not a passive thing. It doesn't just simply allow us to do anything we want. Sometimes, if you've ever been a parent, and I remember in my own life having to have awful purple cough syrup when I was ill. I still can't stand the taste of purple foods today simply because of that cough syrup and that cough medicine. Or perhaps a better example is when I was in 8th grade and I had an appendix attack. I didn't want to go to the hospital. In fact, I tried to hide from my parents and wanted to go outside. I was bent over in pain, but they made me go to the hospital because they loved me. More importantly, they forced me to go under a procedure in which I had a knife cut into me to take out my appendix. They put me to a knife for my very good. I can show you the scar. I won't, but I could show you that scar, a reminder of how much my family loved me, to protect me, to save me. And the truth is, in these last few weeks, it has been hard to find that Christian love, to go beyond our very selves and to remember that all of our neighbors are inherently given the dignity of being made in the image and likeness of God. It is this dignity that we desire to protect, but not just in those who have been victims of violence, but even in the perpetrators. And that can be extremely difficult. I have myself struggled with that kind of love. And yet we are called to do that love. But I want to be abundantly clear here. The love that we are being invited to in this time is not a safe love. It is not a love that allows us to go and do what we want and be, scot-free or harm-free. But rather it is a love that might and can and will put us into harm's way. I don't know exactly what it means to do the sit-in of our time. But we look to the other identities of our baptismal call to help us to understand how to act in a way that will bring that dignity to every human person. For example, to be a prophet does not mean that we can tell the future. Human beings are awful at predicting the future. Just ask any weather person what the 10-day forecast is going to look like. It's kind of my favorite thing because it changes so wildly. Next week it might be 40 degrees, or it might be -10, or somewhere in between. We really cannot predict the future, and the prophets don't invite us to do that. They invite us to go to our roots, to go to that relationship with God, to reorient our hearts to the commandments that God has given us. And thus, by being closer to the God who has created us, the God who loves us, we orient our very hearts, our very selves towards the image of that God, and thus follow his commandments and follow in his love. A prophet's work is not trying to tell you what's going to happen in the future. A prophet's job is to remind you of the love of God and what is at stake if we fail to be in that right relationship. And thus, we're also called to be kings. We're not called to be high-powered, civic kings that can do anything we want. On the contrary, we are called to be civically minded. That the idea of kingship is a secular one, and yet we are baptized into that identity, an identity in which working for the common good is an absolute necessary of being Christian. And so we are called to respond in this time. We are called to act in this world. We are called to follow upon priest, prophet, and king in our relationships. I honestly cannot tell you exactly how to go about this business. And I'm looking for answers as we continue to try to deal with the realities as they continue to shift and change. And there are smarter people than me who exist in our parish who are constantly thinking and working for these ideals. Our hope, in fact, my hope over the last several weeks has been this community. It has been this community of people who have come together to share their pain, to share their sorrow, and to share their grieving as they desire to be priests, prophets, and kings for the world. The invitation this Sunday, as we recognize a baptism, as we recognize a real baptism with a little one, is that we must live out the promises that we in this community take, that we promise to help raise this child in the faith, that we promise to raise them so that they may love God and love their neighbor as God has called us to. This invitation is either one that we take seriously or we simply give lip service to. And I don't believe that this community of St. Thomas More only wants to give lip service to this promise, this vow that we make to raise this child in the faith. My friends, as we celebrate the baptism of our Lord, let us enter into the deep promises in which we are chrismated, right? That beautiful smelling oil is placed on the forehead of the child, and when we invite them into their baptismal dignity of priest, prophet, and king. That beautiful smelling chrism consecrated at the Chrism Mass on Holy Thursday. As we remember a God who gives his very self for us on the cross for the salvation of the world, because God saw us and desired this right relationship. God, a God of love, will respond to our prophetic desires, our priestly desires, and our kingly intentions of the common good. Let us enter into these baptismal promises. Let us respond to them, and through them, share the good news that is love in the world.